Destiny 2 has an amazing endgame full of challenging activities like raids, dungeons, master lost sectors, and Grandmaster Nightfalls. But getting into these activities as a fresh or even an experienced player can be a bit daunting. In this video, I interviewed my friend EK, who's helped more Guardians complete their first Grandmaster Nightfall than probably anyone else on Earth. We talk about how to get started with Destiny's endgame, what armor and weapons to work towards to make really powerful builds, what subclasses don't get as much attention as they probably should, and so much more. I hope you really love this chat. I know you're going to learn a lot. Do me a favor, and after you watch this, hop over to EK's channel to subscribe and also leave a comment letting him know that you enjoyed the interview. Now let's get into it. Alright, so the very first question I have for you is, how many total GMs have you done at this point? Do you have any idea? I'm just curious.
We are at 4,060.
Oh my god, that's so many. And out of that, how many do you think those were helping other people do GMs? Was that like most of them?
Yeah, most of them. Like at least 95% of them.
That's amazing. Yeah, I remember seeing your gold vault from, I forget where I first saw it on Twitter or something, but just all the exotics that you had masterworked with the Ascendant shards was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there was nothing else to do. I believe it was Season of the Arrivals, and it was just like, all right, we're helping people get their stuff done. Might as well find something to go after.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And sunsetting was a thing too, so I didn't really need to save like vault space, so I just got rid of a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. So basically what I want to do here is just help people figure out how to get a little deeper with the end game of Destiny. I know it's kind of a thing that's a little bit tricky for people. They get started with the game and there's just a lot to pick up when you're a brand new player. I made a video recently just helping people kind of learn how to just approach the game from the beginning, but we didn't go super deep into the end game stuff. And so I want to just talk to you about like how to get going with like GMs, which are Grandmaster Nightfalls for those of you who might not know about those, raids, master raids, dungeons, even like solo stuff like lost sectors. Like, because I know it's something that I think a lot of newer players just, it's like way intimidating and they're not really sure how to get started with that content. And then I also want to talk about strategies, like how to do well in them, both individually and then, you know, as part of a team, talking about like builds, and we got some fun questions to go over too.
Endgame is definitely fun, so yeah, I can't wait to talk about this.
Yeah, so I'll let you kind of guide it because I know that you get these kind of questions in your Twitch chat like all the time. But when new players come to you and ask you like how to get started, and let's start with Grandmasters because I think that's what you're best known for. Like, what do you start to tell people? How do you get them, you know, going down that road?
Usually, when people come in, they ask about, you know, like GMs. The first thing is I always tell them GM or even master modes for raids. The one difference most of the time are going to be champions. So if you're comfortable with champions, then you're good to go. I remember making an entire like Reddit written post, and then I made a video for it, but it was basically just breaking down champions, depending on the weapon type that's on the artifact for that season, what to pay attention to, so then you know that it's not actually just like a random thing in the game when you stop an unstoppable, or when you like stun an overload, or, you know, like when a barrier shield is about to, you know, go up. There's multiple things that kind of like go into it. But I tell people, you just start out going into a lost sector, make sure you're at level for that lost sector, and then pay attention to these patterns. Like an unstoppable, when you stun them, they're down for about 6 seconds. They get to take almost 4 to 5 times damage that they normally wouldn't take when they're standing up. When they get up, they have a halo around their neck, which tells you that you can't stun them. And at the same time, they're not taking that weakened damage anymore. You have to wait for that to go away. That's about 5 to 6 seconds. Once that goes away, you can stun them again, and then you can do more damage. I've seen people just shoot their heavies and their special ammo right into an unstoppable without even stunning it, because they think they're doing, you know, maximum damage. An overload, you can kind of like brute force that if you're powerful enough or have enough shots on it. But an unstoppable, it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, they're pretty tanky.
Yeah, once you get comfortable with that, then you slowly work your way up. Try to get it to be a red sword. You know, become 10 levels under, because if you're 9 levels under, the enemies won't be a red sword. They'll be at level. As soon as you're 10 levels under, you'll see a red sword. Get comfortable in that zone. And if you want to, you know, be GM ready, try to be 25 levels under so you can practice, You can see what works. You can see what does enough damage. You can see if you have enough time to burst and kill a champion, especially if you're just in a master law sector on your own, because most of the time their aggression is kind of the same. So practice is also another thing, being comfortable. And I believe a lot of people are, I got to say, they don't really have the kill instinct. Like when they stun a champion, that window that just opened up to do damage, a lot, like I tell folks all the time, even if I'm playing with them, we stun a champion, I'm here in primary, I'm like, hey man, I like you a lot. I have Aeons on. You have a lot of heavy. We need, killer mode needs to come out right here.
Yeah.
These aren't teddy bears. Because one champion can ruin your entire run.
Yeah. So speaking of champions, there's so for people who are brand new, they might not understand that there's like mods that you can get from the seasonal artifact every season that allow you to disrupt all the different types of champions. There's the overloads, anti-barrier, and unstoppables are the 3 different types we have right now. And so there's mods you can put on your armor that allow certain weapon types. Like for example, I think isn't it like overload SMG this season? I think.
Yeah, it's SMG and AR this season.
Yeah, so like you can put those onto your armor, and then that allows you to disrupt them. But then there's also some exotics that have that intrinsically. Like for example, Ariana's Vow is one of the first ones that had anti-barrier. So
yeah,
there's like particular exotics. So when you're thinking about like setting up for like a GM or even like a solo lost sector, how do you think about building your character? Like, because there's like the mods that are rotating throughout the season, but then there's different like shields to think about and your exotic armor choices, exotic weapons. Like, what goes through your head when you're trying to put together like a really good build to tackle some of these things?
That's a good question. When I'm going into law sectors, the first thing I'm paying attention to is what is the burn, because then that automatically tells me, okay, more than likely my primary that I'm going to be using, if there's a lot of enemies in there, depending on the enemies and the shields, I'm probably going to stick to that burn. And then throughout the seasons, there's been weapons that have perks on them that actually help you out when it comes to match game. Like adaptive munitions is one of those where people were like, it doesn't work against match game. I was like, this perk is actually perfect for it. Because at one point, there were 2 exotics that you can talk about that can kind of cover all the shields that were viable. Because someone's going to tell me about that AR that switches all different elements, and I'm going to say no. Now, there's Borealis and there's Arbalest. They both work really well in endgame. But the neat thing, and the reason why Arbalest became king, especially in like match game and in an endgame, is because not only does it allow you to one break any shield, right? It's also linear fusion, which basically it's almost like a heavy. When you break a shield, you also have disruption break, so that weapon gets to do 50% more damage. So in most builds, if someone's going into activity that's going to have match game and anti-barrier, Arbalest is at the top of the line. And, it's not a bad thing, because now it opens up, your energy slot and your heavy slot. Now, what you do with those other 2 slots depends on what we're like. Same thing here, like what we're talking about. If I'm going into a law sector and it's solar, and there's unstoppable, and this season has scouts as unstoppable, sure, I'm probably going to bring a solar scout because I know that Arbalest is going to be able to cover any shield that I need it to.
That's interesting.
If it's void, I'm probably going to bring like a Valsafe. Now, if the shields are a little bit too annoying and you feel like you're not going to have a lot of special ammo around, you can always run a special finisher if you feel like one of your supers, like the super that you have, isn't something that you're going to use a lot. Because there are certain supers that are really good for ad clearing, but most of the time you're not really going to need to use it. That's like, imagine running Nova War. People are like, oh yeah, I'm going to save this to kill all these ads. Probably not.
Yeah, this is a good
Right?
question. What are some of the supers that you would like to keep and not use for special or heavy finishers, and which are some of the ones that you're okay with like giving away to get the ammo temporarily?
I would say in the past, Chaos Reach was best with Geomags because you can sprint back for that energy. So you can basically like do a finisher and then sprint back and get your super again, which made it really busted. But right now, when it comes to subclasses, if you know the encounters that you're about to go through. For example, if I'm running a well and I know that I'm not going to be placing the well anytime soon, or I know when I'm going to need it by, I'm probably going to run a special finisher with it. If I'm a triple tether hunter, not the single, but the one that shoots 3,
Mhm.
Deathfall, I believe, I'm probably going to use that because that tether is made for single targets, to kind of punch out a lot of damage. It's not made for ad control. And if I need to kind of give that energy up to make ammo for my teammates, I will. But here's another thing that comes into play now. If I'm not alone and I'm running with teammates, Aeons is probably going to be my first choice unless there's something on the artifact mod that makes heavy. So this season, I actually don't even take Aeons off. It's also a nice way to introduce people to be more confident in using their heavy, right? Like showing how good Aeons are. Now, I'm not saying that I want Aeons to be nerfed or anything, but the person that's running Aeons is not going to get that ammo. It's still a sacrifice because you're making ammo for your teammates. You're putting yourself on a line in order to like go
Right.
and make ammo.
Buffing
Like
them.
if there's if there's an orange bar, you're making special. If there's a yellow bar, you're making heavy. But sometimes those enemies are out there, so you need your teammates to kind of cover you. And if your teammates aren't using that heavy that you're making, there's going to be risky times where you're probably going to die trying to make heavy for someone who's not going to use it. So that's one of those things too. I always like call out like, hey, this allows you to play aggressively, especially in the mode that you're 25 levels under, and you need to hit hard. You know, and a lot of people always talk about like recovery this, recovery that. And I was like, you can't recover from something that's going to one shot you. But if you have resilience, especially this season, then you're going to be able to at least to take that shot because I think most people don't even read it. But in game, it says how much damage you can take before a certain like it basically says like how much damage you can take before dying. So resilience is really nice to have. Now recovery is pretty good too. I mean, if you're a Titan, you should be building into resilience and recovery because you have a shield. And I always tell people this. A lot of Titans will come in and they're on the open and they're like, "Oh my god, what do I do?" I'm like, "Put up your barricade." Like when you're hurt, what's the first thing you're looking for? Cover. You have one. Use it. Even if you don't have to be behind that cover for more than 2 seconds, put it up because the enemies are probably going to shoot that, which allows you to move somewhere else. So there's just like intrinsic things on each class too in this game, and people are scared to like play each one. And I think there are ways to play each character in Destiny, especially in endgame. Multiple ways to play them. All I hear is classy restoration. It's a cool thing, but I don't think it's needed.
And it won't
So
be
when I
around
look,
forever too, right? So
yeah, and it
you
won't
have
be
to
around
adapt
forever. Like
soon.
you don't want to put that into your mindset where like you feel like I always need this. Like it's always nice to have something that's probably going to give you a damage buff, something that's going to do damage outside of things, but not something that like builds muscle memory into you. Oh, I'm weak. Let me just dodge. Oh, I'm weak. Let me put up a wall. I'm weak. Let me put up my rift. Because in the next season, you're going to do that thinking that you're going to heal and nothing's going to happen. And
Yeah.
people always like question that, like, how come you're not running Blade Barrage? I'm like, I'm sorry to say this, but Void Hunter is still one of the strongest things in the game. The reason why is because not only can you be invisible, you can also like take out some of the challenges that come up. You can move your teammates from one section to another without having to like engage, right? It's one of the best classes in the game to engage and disengage.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why, when people do their solo GMs or solo Nightfalls, the first choice is usually an invisible hunter. Like the tools are there. Strong grenades, the ability to get in and get out, and a strong super. Not only like a super that can like hold down ads, but there's also a multi-tether super that can do damage by itself as well.
Yeah, it's such a versatile class.
Yeah.
So along that same line of topics, like what do you see people doing when you're helping them and carrying people who don't have a lot of experience? What are the things that they do that get them killed a lot? Like, what should people try to not do to stay alive better in the endgame stuff, particularly in GM Nightfalls?
I think some people just play like lackadaisical. Like they they kind of throw their lives away. It's almost like they treat like a strike because they think or like perfect example, a guy will watch you like do something and he's like, man, that looks so easy, and they get in and they try to play that aggressively, but the thing is they don't have that experience. They don't know exactly, okay, if I get in trouble here, this is my cover, right? Or if I do this, I can just come back this way. So they don't know all these things. They'll just run out in the open with an ogre that was stunned and is now getting up and has his unstoppable halo, and there's nothing we can do about it, but this person's running up to it. Or you have a guy that watched me run Aeons, they want to run Aeons, and then they think they could just go for a finish at any time, not knowing that there's a certain thing like a dot that shows up on top of the head, that's when you can finish. And even when we speak about that, Aeons is different sects, right? So the sect of Insight is the one that makes you special and heavy. And people will run Aeons without not even knowing which sect that they need to run. There's just like these and then you have the people that they're just like, they had so many like bad experiences in LFG or in other places that they come in and you'll see them with like double primary. Like they're like, I want to be able to, like work on both champions. And I'm like, no, it's a team effort. Like we're not going to just like put you in a bad place. We're going to get this done. You just have to trust in your teammates sometimes to kind of cover things.
They have PTSD from being the only guy with the anti-barrier stuff.
Yeah, like I feel like they had nightmares like being the last person alive, and they didn't have that unstoppable, or they didn't have that anti-barrier or that overload to stop that, that last guy. Like, and that's what caused the wife. Like I see it all the time. I'm like, hey man, like, do you have like a special ammo weapon you'd like to use? Maybe a wither horde, maybe just a sniper. Like a secondary source of damage. It's just like two primaries is cool. If you're running like anarchy, like before it got nerfed, how strong that was. But right now you don't really need to, know. And it's I see that a lot. And it's so bad. You see someone stun a champion and they're just shooting it with their scout rifles, and I'm like, man, if you only knew like you're not doing much to that guy. He's gonna heal like this in 2 seconds, and he is going to spam you.
What kind of special weapons do you like to see people taking? Like, if you have a mini tier list of special weapons that you see people coming in, like, what makes you excited that they have when they're on your team?
Okay, if someone comes in, they have a pretty good heavy, and it matches like the burn for for whatever Grandmaster we're tackling, and then I see like a blinding grenade launcher, or I see a sniper. Or even during last season when we had fusions be good, people had on fusions. Whenever I see a secondary source of damage, I'm happy because I'm like, all right, cool. This person actually, like they want to put in some work here. They're like, they want to maximize their time. It is always weird when you see someone come in with like 2 primaries, because it really feels like they really had the worst time on LFG like possible. Seriously, like it's nuts, and it's neat too when I see people run an intrinsic like a weapon that already has a champion perk on it. See guys come in, oh, I want to run div. I'm like, cool. You already knew there were overloads in here. That's cool. Like this season I had people bringing Leviathan's Breath for Unstoppable. Leviathan's Breath is doing pretty well this season. It's a pretty strong weapon. During Void Burn, why not? There are certain nightfalls that are really tough, and I do try to help out with the loadout. I see what the person has, and we'll kind of like work it out. But in most Grandmasters, if it's nothing too crazy, I kind of let people kind of like use what they want to use. And, if something looks funky, I'm like, hey, this is probably not the best thing, but if you want to run it, you can. because not everyone has the shards to like infuse and bring stuff up to light. So I don't want to sit here and tell you, hey man, you should put this up. The weapon that's probably at light is probably this person's favorite weapon. They're probably not going to do that much end game. They're probably just going to run around patrols and like do strikes. So I don't want to like ruin that experience of you having your favorite gun. There's times when people are like, oh man, I'm going to infuse. I'm like, no, don't infuse that. What else do you have?
Yeah,
let's
gotcha.
let's figure this out. Everyone remembers the first few weapons they got in Destiny 1 or 2 that they like, that not everyone else liked, but you were like, oh man, this is awesome. I like this. So I never want to take that away from folks. But when it comes to some of the harder ones, like last season we had Lightblade. And, a lot of folks, I spoke about bringing a rock or Arbalest. And at first people kind of questioned it. But eventually they liked it because we had the heavy finishers. And, people were like, why not a linear fusion? And that's another thing, too. You have to kind of take a lot of things into play. I have friends that I can run a strike with, and yeah, we can all run linears and get that strike done. But when it comes to certain strategies, certain weapons are just much better. So Lightblade boss room, we know that at a certain point, when someone has the boss attention and he gets a certain health, a champion's going to come out with a few adds. Now, a linear is cool. Yeah, you could do damage to that champion for it to close up so you can break a shield. But a rocket is going to make that champion shield up and kill the acolytes that are nearby it, right? Mm-hmm. So there's weapon selection is also another thing too. A lot of folks are like, oh, but I want ammo, and I'm like, yes, there's champions. We're gonna make ammo. So if I'm going against a boss that has like a high crit multiplier, I'm not gonna use rockets. I'm gonna use linear. So each strike kind of has things that are needed. If there's ad density, for an example, it's nice to have one person with a machine gun. That's never a bad thing because you know that you can kind of clear up stuff, right?
Yeah.
You can have supers dedicated for that. I think it was when Glassway first came out. Everyone wanted to run a bunch of different things. And I spent a lot of time in the boss room. We started noticing patterns where enemies went, what health bar started what. Like if you did too much damage to the mini or the big boss, more champions came out. But then we wanted to be aggressive, and the only way to kind of do that was Ursa Titans. You have 2 Ursa Titans, and you have a Tether Hunter. So when these ads are together, you tether out, and you have a shield. You can kind of play aggressively, and like even with the boss being outside, you can block and do damage to the boss and then go back inside. So a lot of people are like, oh man, I'd rather just freeze them. But the thing about running a stasis warlock sometimes, yeah, you're freezing the champion, but if you're not doing enough damage to kill it, eventually it's going to spam the crap out of you, especially if there's 4 of them. That turret is only going to focus on 1 or 2, So there's always like adjustments to subclasses and weapons, and each season it is nice to see like a change of pace depending on what Bungie throws on the artifact. But the intrinsic exotic weapons, like you said, are a game changer. I do hope that we get to see more for Overload, because I believe there's 3 for anti-barrier. We have Arianas, we have Arbalest, we have Lament. Yeah, so we have Lament. So there's 3 options: kinetic, energy, heavy. Right? Unstoppable. We have a sidearm. We have a heavy bow. So it's just, like for Unstoppable, there's also 3. Mm-hmm. So it's just, we have Bastion in the kinetic slot for Unstoppable. And the neat thing about these weapons is you don't need to, like, for example, Unstoppable, you need to aim down sight with the weapon and wait about 3 seconds for the weapon to light up, and it'll show Unstoppable on your screen, and then you can shoot that. If I grab a Bastion, I can hip fire it, and it will still stun it because it has an intrinsic perk. So yeah, for Divinity, normally for overload weapons, when you have to put in a certain amount of shots, which is why the community is not a huge fan of SMG and AR, because that shot normally procs at the mid of your mag. Bungie they changed it a bit. I believe it now procs about a third, which isn't bad. But with a hand cannon, if you have explosive round, 2 shots will proc that overload round, and then you have a timer of 7 seconds, which allows you to pace your shots on the overload to keep it from regenning. And a bow is basically perfect. Every drawn bow is an overload shot. So you can keep that overload from, regenning the whole time if you have a bow, which is why a lot of people are pushing for like an exotic bow to, have an intrinsic overload. But if I grab Div, I can hip fire at overload and boom, that thing is stunned.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to do anything else about it. So it'll be neat to kind of see like other overload weapons for like intrinsic exotic for, next season. I'm not too sure. But right now, if I'm going into activity and I don't have a hand cannon overload, a scout, or a bow, I'm probably going to stick to divinity because that is the most like consistent weapon that's going to work against overload. Not only that, you also get to get that debuff, so you do get to do more damage. And then if you're having issues in the boss room for boss damage, div is also going to help out in that instance. Unless that boss is it has a high crit multiplier, then there's no point in using div because you're going to do less damage. I never understood why that's a thing, but that's also a thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird interaction.
Yeah.
So let's say that you're either you're a brand new player or maybe like let's say that you made a brand new account. What are the weapons that you would go for first to try to like have the best chance to do well in GMs or just end game content in general, I guess?
Okay. I would if I create a new account, one of the first few weapons I would definitely be going after. I mean, one of the easier ones to go after would be the Gallahorn because you can get that from the 30th anniversary. And then I know most folks would probably say Ariana's, but I would say Arbalest. Arbalest is probably one of the most used exotics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's too good in match game. Like if you think about it, all end game has match game. Like you need to match that shield. Arbalest is just king of that. And then having Genesis, when you break that shield, your weapon is fully loaded. Or if you break a barrier shield, that is fully loaded. So those, I would say those two probably the first thing that I would throw in my arsenal. Then I would just look at the artifact. If it was this season, I would probably try to use my Umbro engrams to try to get a vouchsafe. As I'm playing, I'm definitely going to do my best to look out for a staccato, which is the solo version of a scout for unstoppable. But I got to say, vouchsafe is something that I basically use in every GM this season because there's voice shields and there's unstoppable. So that's like a neat one to just have. The heavy slot depends. Now we do have Storm Chaser, which is a really good heavy linear right now,
and that's from the new dungeon, right?
That's from the new dungeon. So coming as a new player, if my light is up a bit, I'm probably going to jump in there and try to get that. So having Arbalest, a vouchsafe, and a Storm Chaser, I'm kind of set, just good to go. Now, when it comes to exotic armor, I might have to wait for Zerd, pay attention, see what comes from there. As a new player, probably not going to go for Aeons. You probably want to go for something like Graviton Forfeit if you're going to play Void. There's also a cool thing about Graviton Forfeit is when you're invisible, your recovery is basically at 100, so you get to recover faster. So that may be something that people can get like you get into the game. Okay, let me see if I can use this and get comfortable with this. My all-time favorite exotic is probably going to be Assassin Cal, and if I can't get my hands on Aeons, if I get my hands on Assassin Cal, I'm kind of set there. But when it comes to the loadout, yeah, I would say.
What subclass do you like to use that with mostly?
I run Assassin Cal on any subclass, but mainly Void. The cool thing about Assassin Cal is if there's an artifact mod that creates heavy, that thing heals you fully every time, and it also has a damage mitigation. So last season, I finished the Thrall, and I had a Hive Barrier Knight and Void Super come up to me, use both his hands, and smack me while I was finishing. And then he put his arms out, and I lived. So, and then I tested the same thing again. He threw a shield, and I did a finisher, and I lived. And it's because that health gate that I'm getting from the cow resistance is just insane. So there's besides the cow allows me to live through things that I shouldn't be living through. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
It also allows me to like play very aggressively because if I get in a room and I know that I can make a few red enemies one shot for a finisher, I know that I can get through that room with like without any effort really. When Void 3.0 came out, you can actually go invisible for 24 seconds with Assassin Cal. If you do a finisher on a yellow bar, you're invisible for 24 seconds.
Wow, that's crazy.
And then if you don't let that 24 seconds go away and you dodge by an enemy, it refreshes it. So that's 48 seconds. I remember people were asking like, "How are you invisible for so long?" And you know, at first they thought I was using like the fragment to make it last longer, and I was like, no, you definitely don't want that fragment on. No, you want the fragment on, but you don't want obscurity on. Obscurity is the one that when you do a finisher, you go invis. You can't stack those two.
Oh,
and I remember people trying to like mimic my build and like, I'm only getting 7 seconds, and I was like, maybe you have obscurity on, and they took it off. All right, cool. I now have the 24 seconds, and I was like, there you go. I mean, that's a long time, but that also gives me a lot of time to figure out if I want to make a decision. I remember I made a breakdown for why you shouldn't go for a res right away, and that's another thing that a lot of people do, like new players do. So if a fire team member goes down, they just run right to the body to pick it up, and the game kind of has like this smart node where if someone goes down, the ads become more aggressive. And they're aggressive around that body too. I don't know how to explain it.
It's like they're playing trials against you.
Yeah, there's plenty of times where like, you know, like someone's dead and they're like, okay, we're gonna push up. But when everyone's alive, they're kind of like backed up. I remember someone was like, you know what, you're right. Like I do try to go for res all the time. And the thing is you have to play cat and mouse. I remember the Lightblade room, the boss, you know, like it's not like the boss saw me, but the boss knew I was just there in Viz. So I basically had to bring all the ads to one side and then play pity there. And then I went for a res. And I didn't go for 2 res at the same time. I got one, made them in Viz, and moved them to another section before I go for the last one. And, you know, there has to be smart decision making too when this happens. I've seen people die in the middle open, and then I see the next guy going for him. I'm like, don't you do that. I was like, you're throwing your life away. There's a champion right there in that corner just waiting. You know? The best thing you could do for your fire team when you die in a Grandmaster, do not give us any excuses why you die. I don't need to know that you stubbed your toe and somehow you died. The main thing is to give information. And it may sound like a crazy Crucible thing where like, oh, I just died in trials. I need to tell my teammates where things are.
It sounds just like PvP tips, right? It's like the same idea.
It is, yeah. It is the same idea. Because now that you're dead, I need you to give me the info of what's around me. If you're going to watch me, like, watch my back. So usually when I die, I always tell stream, like, okay, I'm watching Stump, I'm watching Beta. Guess what I'm doing? I'm giving them information. So whether they know they could be aggressive or they can't be aggressive. Or to know if there's something sneaking up on them. You know, don't just die and then just leave your ghost there hoping your teammates get you. You want to communicate. You want to still like be on the field. You still want to help out. And that saved a lot of runs plenty of times. You know? Because there are random deaths in Destiny. A lot of random deaths. You can jump down and all of a sudden your jump is not there and you're dead. You know, the boss that normally doesn't one-shot you for some reason just one-shot you. You know, like you just got booped somewhere by lag, and now you don't know when where your orb is at, and your teammates have to pull you to the boss. So there's just multiple ways, and things could go wrong, and things could also go right. But information is also another thing that people, I think, instead of panicking, I always tell people, you don't have to panic. Like no one's gonna be mad. What's the worst thing that could happen? We just restart the strike. That's it. You know. Like, I felt strikes. That is the worst thing that can happen. We're gonna restart the strike, and we're gonna do it again. That is it.
Not a big deal.
You know, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
people also got kicked from groups and they got yelled at and stuff. So like I understand that part of it too. You know, not completing something and then like everyone's pointing fingers. One of the main things is as soon as that happens, I'm like, I'll take the blame. It was me. Let's do it. Let's just get back in here. All right. I'll just do better. And boom. You got to move on to the next play too. When it comes to just endgame. And that's even on like on day one raids, right? Like instead of like spending that time being frustrated, try to see what else works. You know, you just never know.
Yeah. That's really good advice. I think a lot of people could benefit from that. So I got a couple interesting questions from you from Twitter from different people who submitted them.
Oh man,
some of these are pretty good. So I really like this one from Yerda. What are your favorite Grandmaster builds that are underused but are still really effective? Specifically thinking about like exotics that you don't see a whole lot but you think are actually like better than people give them credit for.
I would say last season, if you were a warlock, I've seen a lot of folks use controverse holds. But my first clear was with osmiomancy gloves for the warlock on stasis. There's actually like a nice little firepower build that I made. The neat thing about osmiomancies is since you have two charges for your cold snaps, you can basically have one up as a turret and the other one will just keep recharging. So if you throw one and it hits about 3 to 4 targets, you have your grenade back. Mind you, those targets are frozen. And since you have two, you can make it to where you can have two turrets up and still have your grenade back, right? So it's something that basically just feeds back into your energy. But most of the time when I see most folks use it, they just put out 2 turrets right away. You know, instead of like using what that exotic is made for, it's made for you to consistently have cold snaps. But that thing is really strong in endgame as well. When it comes to like just being able to hold down a room with ads, that's one that's kind of like overlooked. If we go into the Titan has a lot of fun builds. And if you ever wanted to like just go around with strong abilities, I don't see too many Titans using harder and most light. Like in endgame. You know, I see Ursa's, I see Aeons, I see the Thunder Crash chest piece. But if like especially this season with Solar, if you built into just your abilities, being able to put up your shield and having empowerment ×1, and then throwing that grenade, that's going to be empowerment ×2 for your melee, which is your hammer. Or you can use the hammer to get the the ×2. You stack that with rolling flames. You throw a grenade. That grenade is doing 50% more damage. You know, so there's so many ways to make your like. I've seen people come in with Solar Titans, and I haven't seen Harder and Most Light actually being used, and it's pretty nuts. The Titan also has these boots that a lot of people don't really like take use of either. The Path of Burning Steps. We have a lot of great solar weapons that you can use. We even have the Callus Mini Tool and the perk Incandescent. So you can kind of like get this show on the road. In PvE, if you get 1 stack, that's already 20%. If you get to 2 stack, that's 25. I believe 3 stack is 35 and 4 stack is 40%. So this is for your solar weapons. And I haven't seen anyone kind of use that to the full potential. Sleeper hits really hard too. I remember pairing this with Sleeper and using like Fonts of Might.
Interesting. Yeah, that seems like that'd be really powerful for Solar 3.0 builds.
Yeah. But I also understand why a lot of people don't use a lot of Solar Titans. The niche is the super's not good, right? So that's another class that you can probably just run Special Finisher with because you're probably not going to use your super as much. I kind of wish there was like one Solar, Titan super that was like pretty strong. I was talking with Chad. I was like, what if there's just like a one-shot hammer? Like you pull out this huge hammer,
just go bonk
pull
someone
over your head. Yeah, and it's just like yeah.
That'd be
It's like
awesome.
you're playing whack-a-mole, but it's just like you take it up, you just whack it down. It's just one big hit.
I'd
You
be
know,
down for that.
like
That sounds
oh
awesome.
man,
It's like the Celestial Nighthawk, but a huge hammer.
yeah, but a huge hammer. Like
That'd be awesome.
think about that, and it leaves like just flames. At the bottom of it,
Hmm.
almost like you doing a thunder crash where you have the arc on the ground, but you have like this flaming pit after you do it. Um, be neat,
Yeah, that
but
sounds awesome. What about for Hunter? You already mentioned the Assassin's Call. That's a kind of an unusual pick. I don't hear a lot of people talking about that one. What other things on Hunter do you see that are kind of cool that people don't use enough?
I would say Frosties. Frosties are fun. Frosties are just another like neutral exotic that you can use in most places. When it comes to neutral exotics, at Frosties, Verity Brow, or even not even Verity Brow, I would say my brain's going somewhere, but I have another world. So Frosties, I have another world, and Heart of Amos Light. Those three help with a lot of regen, and they also help with certain aspects of the game. Um, a lot of people don't use Frosties for some reason. I remember in the past, people asked me, why do I run mobility and discipline on my Frosties? And it was the season where we had when we first got void weakening grenades. Um, I've got the exact name of the mod, but it was
Oppressive Darkness.
Oppressive
Yeah, yeah.
Darkness. It was just insane. It was like, why are you running against the wall? I'm like, don't worry, I'm just using my Frosties.
You gotta get that nade back.
I would get that nade back within like 5 to 7 seconds
Yeah.
and just like throw it. And all it required from me was just movement. And back then we had Heart of the Pack. So you can use your smoke to make you and your teammates invisible. It gave you your grenade back. Then if you threw your grenade gave you your melee energy back. And then you stack that with Gambler's Dodge and you were set. But when Stasis came out, I couldn't even take Frosties off. It's funny because, Frosties, I guess, are supposed to be cold.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
The dodge to freeze was just insane. So you throw on Frosties, run around. If an ad gets near you, you dodge. They're frozen. You have your melee. You let it go, and you basically have all this up. Like the uptime for this was ridiculous. And in any subclass that we have, when you throw on Frosties, the only thing that you have to do is run. And it's weird because a lot of people tell me I don't want to run. I was like, but when you're in the end game or even in Crucible, you're not standing. You're
Yeah.
consistently moving. So why not use something that's just gonna give you, like a free thing? Which is why I love Perpetual Motion. A lot of people don't think about that, but Perpetual Motion is one of those things where like that perk is basically up the whole
Yeah,
time.
you're always moving, getting that.
You're
Absolutely.
always moving. Yeah. Why
Yeah.
not use some of these things that are just there, just to use? You don't have to do anything.
It's interesting because Frosty's also got more popular in PvP now because of the Radiant thing where you just run in, get your dodge back faster. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to try more in PvE. Did you play D1 back in the day? No, if you
Yeah, I played
okay.
that new one.
Because I used to use Frosties back in D1 because they were the only way you could not have that sprint radius thing, where you like turn slower.
Oh yeah.
So like I used to love them for that, but I haven't used them as much in D2. I should probably spend more time with them in PvE.
Yeah. I would say the last exotic for the hunter that I use a lot that people ask me about is Full Tracer. Um, I don't think a lot of people know that when an enemy gets below 30%, you get 1% for every time it loses. So like if an enemy's at 20% health, you get to do 10% more damage. If an enemy's at 10% health, you get to do 20% more damage. So when I did like my solo duality dungeon, everyone was like, "Why'd you switch to your full trace?" And I was like, "Because Kaido's health is a huge pool, but when she got to 30%, I am doing more damage. So, like it's hard to explain it, but I was telling people, I was like, yeah, imagine you're doing a raid and you start out with Nighthawk and you're doing damage, and that boss gets below, like, let's say that boss gets to 25%. 5% of that boss, like think about it this way. Like if you're fighting like a red bar or a yellow bar or orange, like a yellow bar, their health pool's not that big. But when you're fighting like bosses, like raid bosses, think about how much health they have and how much damage you get to do because it starts so early.
Oh yeah,
Right?
definitely.
So it's one of those things where everyone's like, why use full trace? I was like, okay, think about it this way. If I'm using a hand cannon on an enemy that I can 3-tap, if I shoot them once and they're in under 30, that's a 2-tap. That's not a 3-tap anymore. Right? So there's just multiple places where full trace is good. And then this season, the whole inaccuracy thing, so now people are starting to use it more for PvP, but
Yeah.
it is a great thing to have in PvE.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of in a different MMO game how there's like finisher
Mhm.
moves and like things like that. It's kind of cool. It's like a similar idea to that, but that's really smart, especially for like health gated bosses where there's like 4 chunks or something, and it's
Yeah.
like like you got time to switch it in like the last quarter. As the boss gets weaker, you get stronger. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
if you think about it, like in raids, we can basically switch our gear. So it's like, all right, cool. I just used my Nighthawk, and I know that this boss is about to be at a certain point. I know that I can do more damage now, and it stacks on top of everything else. So why not?
Yeah, definitely. All right, so this is another cool question for you. So, if you could only play one subclass for all GMs and master raids, etc., for the whole season, I guess we'll go with this season since we know what's out. Which one do you think you would pick?
Ooh, I would have to go with a Void Hunter with Aeons, and that is because no matter what happens, I know that I can find a way to get through because I know that I can make heavy for my team. And I know that if we need to skip something, I can bring that in Viz. And then if it gets too crazy, I kind of know patterns and ways to kind of like get in and get out. But if I was playing as a warlock, it would probably have to be stasis because
Interesting.
because of being out in the open and having to like slow down enemies in order for me to like help my team out. And I'm only choosing stasis, and people are gonna say, what about solo clash of restoration? Choosing stasis because I still get to run Aeons because I won't really have the opportunity to use Starfire Protocol, and there are multiple ways to kind of play around the stasis lock. And I don't think a lot of people kind of like use that much.
Mm-hmm. It has so much crowd control too. Like you can really like lock down a whole area for your team.
Yep, especially if you put it in the right place. That's another thing too, placement, placement and knowing what triggers what, knowing what health is if something's going to come out if I do this or if I do that. I remember everyone went crazy for Garden World, and I remember putting up the guide and just like showing exactly where the boss's health is at, what pillars came up, what ads came out. Because most of the time people try to bake and then you have all of this madness happening around you and you didn't know exactly what caused it. But once you know exactly what causes it, you can kind of know, okay, I can push the boss to this point because I know that I can handle this. Or I don't want to push the boss to this point because I know that I can't handle that.
Right.
So there's always a pattern in the game too. You just sit there and you may fail a few times, but once you start paying attention to what's going on, that's another thing too for a lot of people. If you pay attention to detail, I understand it's a video game, but if you pay attention to detail, it becomes a second nature thing. Like you just tell yourself like, okay, this guy died, so I know this guy's coming out. Like it doesn't become like a thing that you have to think about anymore. You just know what's gonna happen. And all it is just repetition and kind of just diving in there and seeing what's going on. Because it just seems like the lack of knowledge is why people don't get certain things done.
Yeah,
That's about it.
that makes a lot of sense. I've always thought about that because I know a lot of talented PvP players who, like, once you help them learn the knowledge, like they become pretty good at PvE. But I feel like that's the big thing is like people who can already shoot and stuff. Okay, it's like just teaching them the knowledge gap of what they need to know to, to conquer whatever it is because they already have this the fundamental skills of being able to aim and move and whatnot. So this is an interesting question too. Which of the subclasses that are like considered endgame viable for you do you think have the like lowest skill floor? Meaning like what are the easiest to get the most out of, I guess, like the easiest to use? And then which ones do you think have the highest skill ceiling? Like you can get the most out of it if you're incredibly skilled, but maybe they're harder to use if you're not very good with them yet.
Okay, I would say perfect example, Thunder Crash. You know, some Titans running with the Cuirass of the Fallen Star, and like I know a lot of them that kind of know what they're doing because and a perfect example in Endgame, if you go Thunder Crash something and you end up in the middle of everything, you're probably going to die. But I've seen guys find ways to kind of like get in there and get out, right? And I would say that still has a high ceiling because I mean, even myself, I try to Thundercrash some enemies sometimes, and you go through them, and you're like, okay, this game is just perfect. Why did I just go through this huge target?
I have a great
But then
clip
you
too of
learn,
that with
yeah.
the dungeon, the 30th anniversary dungeon. Me and my buddy both thunder crashed through the boss and died at the very end. It was so frustrating.
Oh, dude, that yeah, man. And then like you learn over time, like, all right, if it seems like I just went through something, let me just deviate and go back to that person, but just hit it next to the ground. Um, being the Ursa Titan, a lot of people think it's just easy. It's just like you put up the shield and you block. Um, and when it went from us running with people and doing Glassway, it was kind of scary because we did our best to basically explain, all right, when your shield, when you see your super gets to about 25%, please give us, like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown so the next guy can kind of like replace you, right? And you would think, just telling people to just put up a shield and then, giving you a countdown would be the simplest thing in the world. But it was the opposite. Like people forgot to pay attention to that. There were times where it was their turn to go and they didn't know what to do. Like it was one of the weirdest things. So I would say Void Titans are definitely a bit tricky to use compared to like a Solar Titan where someone just runs around with their baby hammer and they're just knocking everything down.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. For hunters, Celestial Nighthawk, if you're going to use an endgame, I think that takes a lot of skill as well because I've seen a lot of people miss.
You gotta have your aim on point where you waste the whole thing.
Yeah, like you try to go for like a one shot thing and someone misses, boom, there goes the whole
Yeah.
run.
I think there's also some skill with that, like for like knowing that you get a third of your super back if you get the kill on like a champ or something. So you're timing it so you actually get your super back.
And being able to generate orbs for others as well,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can make you orbs. Invis Hunter is in between. Like I seen people throw away their invis. Like they'll just go invis just to go invis, right? Like no purpose. Like they, like you don't have a goal. Like you're not going invis so you can go past something. You're not going invis, to help out a teammate. You're just going invis, and then when it's time for you to need it, it's gone, right? So there's definitely a skill ceiling depending on the exotic that you're using. Like if I throw this coyote on a new Void Hunter, they're probably gonna get like jolly happy because they have 2 dodges. They know they can go invisible twice, and if they're running Gamma's dodge, they know that they also have 2 smokes for invis. But in that same instance, if you give 6 coyote to an experienced player, they know when to dodge. They know when to use their smoke. They know when to hold it. Like they know if they can survive a certain thing without using it. Um, and then the higher you go with Invis Hunter, you notice that like certain hunters will stay Invis without any exotic. Like especially if they're running 100 mobility, they know their cooldown timers. They know exactly when that thing is coming back. They know when they could come out of Invis to kind of engage and then to go back, into Invis, right? They know when to engage and disengage. So Void has like it's easy to play, but it has a huge skilling gap. You know,
Yeah, that makes a lot of
when
sense.
you know, I seen folks. I'm like, yeah, you're in Viz. You know, just go by this guy, dodge, and go here. And it was like, nope, couldn't do it in time because you kind of let yourself like be shown instead of like waiting for like that 1 or 2 seconds to dodge again. You know, you came out of cover, and now like the ads can basically kind of shoot you before you can go back out. And there's also timing for animation, right? So a dodge may seem like it's fast to you, but in game, if those ads see you, they're able to shoot at your target where you're at. I also tell people when you're dodging, always try to dodge the way that you think the enemies don't know where you're going. So like if I'm gonna dodge and there's 3 Cabal guys in front of me shotgunning, I'm probably gonna try to go like towards them because I know that they're gonna be shooting across exactly where I'm gonna be at or where I'm thinking I'm going. Um, Sometimes you'll live and sometimes you'll die, but these are the risks that you take. And then once you get comfortable and you know patterns, you're like, oh, these guys are pushing me. I know that's a dodge to the left, right? These guys are pushing me. I know that's a dodge to the right. But yeah, I like I said, I seen people like clutch on invis because they think the enemies don't know that you're there. But yellow bars and bosses, they kind of know you're there. I don't know how to explain it. They know you're there. Like they'll walk up to you and like lean into you. Now, when you come out of invis, that's when they'll shoot you. But they know you're there. So like you also have to play that kind of like psychic mindset, like, okay, I gotta mess with this guy. He knows I'm here, but like, what if I like smoke here? He's gonna, he's gonna pay attention to the smoke for a while, which allows me to get away. Right. So there's that too.
Mhm.
When it comes to the Void Hunter. Arc Hunter, I feel like Arc Hunter is hard for a lot of folks to get into, whether it's PvP or PvE. Because there's I don't know. It seems bland right now. There was
Yeah.
a point where Arc Hunter was just the thing to be. You know, you just you threw on Raid and Flux. You can kill every ad in the room and then kill the boss with the same super. You know,
Mhm. It was pretty
or
powerful.
yeah, that was pretty powerful, man. And then we had a season where we had the gloves that you can use where you could just go around. Lion's Handshake, you just go around and just kind of just one shot everything.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they do for Arc 3.0 because I mean for Void like that became kind of the meta and then Solar became kind of meta-ish also. I guess Void was still good of
Yeah.
course, but it'll be interesting to see. I think it'll mix things up a little bit. Yeah. Well, anyway, thank
Man.
you for taking the time to talk. It was really fun. I'm sure people are going to get a lot of enjoyment out of listening to this one.
Yep. Man, I mean, like, we all have a passion for Destiny. You know, it's one of those games where, like, you just look into, like, man, there's so much depth. Like, the gunplay feels good. There's so much going on. And there's always going to be positive times and negative times, but I think we're all in for a good ride. We'll hopefully see what, like, Lightfall has to offer. But, yeah, I always just take it one day at a time.
Yep, it's a good way to do it. Awesome. Well, thank you, man. If you enjoyed this chat, be sure to subscribe here and also head over to EK's channel as well to drop a sub. Up next, you might be interested in getting a little bit deeper with Destiny's Crucible endgame. I linked a great chat I recorded with my friend Lemur on how to win more games in Trials of Osiris. It's the one on the top right of your screen and also linked in the description.